Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find a tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
And as always, thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible.
We sure do. Thank you from snowy Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And look at Jimmy's face, how happy he is
I know,
today.
it's exciting.
Yes.
We're getting a white January.
We are.
It's a good start to the year. It's beautiful.
I expect to see a little bit of video clippage of you out barefoot in this
I need to do
weather.
some swimming.
I know. Yeah, you need to do something. So
Yep.
there.
It's
Okay.
coming.
Okay.
It's coming.
All right. Good deal.
Today, on this episode, we're going to talk about the COVID crisis because there's so much going on right now. We were just talking this morning about somebody we know who was in the hospital in ICU here locally in pretty bad shape. And I think that's being replicated all over the place. And I think, in full disclosure, in humility, I think we were probably among some of the people who didn't take it as seriously at first because months had gone by.
Oh, yeah.
And they were predicting this second wave,
yes.
and it was going to, by summertime, it was going to be this huge second wave. Well, that wave didn't come. And life was slowly really getting back to normal for a lot of people. And then all of a sudden, I think it surprised even the scientists. This second wave, it came with a vengeance. And so
when
right
it
now,
hit our area, we hadn't even had one. We had one death, I think.
Yeah, one death.
Through about 8 months, would you say,
Yeah.
of COVID. And so for us, it was unrelatable, all these deaths, really.
Yeah.
But now it's a different story.
Yeah, so it's affecting a lot of people in a lot of different ways, and that's kind of what we wanted to focus on this podcast, and just talk about the different areas and maybe things that you don't think about, or maybe it's on your mind but you don't know statistics. I'm a statistics person. I think statistics are unemotional. They paint a picture of reality where we're not talking about what we feel like is happening. And I think that's really important, especially for people like me. My personality, I'm an empath, so I kind of feel my way through life, and there's a tendency to talk about the way you feel things are going. That's not relevant when it comes to hard statistics. So there's kind of a fine line between turning people and people's lives into just a number, and being on the other extreme where everything is based on feelings. I feel
I
this
think
is really
the numbers help paint the complete picture.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to present today, because this COVID crisis is affecting so many people on so many different levels.
Yes.
And abuse, of course, is outrageously high right now.
Yeah.
And I think the concerns of those who have been abused in the past are, I think people are living on the edge right now, just clawing their way through life.
Yes.
So we're going to show the picture and then come up with some possible remedies to help.
Yeah, because I think that's a big question. What do people do about it?
Right.
So, just some of the stats on the virus itself. In the United States, right now, there are 24 million confirmed cases. 24 million. That is massive. 398,000 deaths just in the United States. That is huge. And
it is.
I don't know of many people anymore who don't know somebody personally who has died from COVID.
You and I now know several
Right.
who have, and our area has been basically unaffected until now.
Yeah.
But we know several who have died from COVID, and I know there are still the naysayers that say, but truth be known,
yeah, it's pretty bad.
It is bad.
Yeah, it's definitely bad.
It's real.
And these,
Yes.
I mean, each one of these deaths represents a person within a family that death is taken away income. It's taken away.
Well, it's impacted families in such a big way. When we had a death in our family, it was a ripple effect.
It's crippling.
And it was crippling, and it has taken, it's going on 6 years now. We're not all standing straight yet from this death. And so there are families who have lost both their mother and their father. They've had multiple deaths even within one family.
Yeah.
And to try to comprehend the emotional impact, let alone the physical, the loss of income, the loss of trust, the loss of friends, the whole isolation of COVID.
Yeah.
It's big.
Well, then you get into all the weird stuff with saying goodbye over FaceTime, and they can't even be in person to say goodbye to each other. Then, we have in our community, I'm sure this is replicated all over the place, where people can't physically be at a funeral. They can't even say goodbye to them in person.
Right.
Whether it's in the hospital or the funeral home,
and that's a trauma that needs to be addressed. I think that trauma alone causes a lot of guilt, heavy grief, and it goes on and on and on. And you don't just blink your eyes and wake up one day and it's all gone.
Right. So. Yeah, absolutely. Worldwide, there are 96 million confirmed cases. Over 2 million deaths worldwide from COVID. These numbers are absolutely astounding. And I think really in the last 2 months, we've seen these numbers just skyrocket. They've gone through the roof.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, worldwide, as horrific as this has been, I think the world fared fairly well. Until the last couple months when it just exploded.
Everything fell apart. Yeah. It did. Yes.
So crime rates. I just read an article this morning. It just came out this morning. In the city of LA, which is the epicenter of the pandemic, COVID, the spread of COVID, they say that LA County has the most per capita cases of anywhere in the United States by far. Homicides are up 150% in the first 16 days of January from last year, up 150%. 59 shooting victims in the month of January so far in the city of LA compared to 7 this time last year.
I remember us doing a podcast last year about, and it had statistics and numbers were rising at that point. But now look where things are.
Yeah.
They have just gotten so out of control. Locally we can see tempers raging. We see people exploding. I had a man explode on me the other day at work, and it was over virtually nothing.
Yeah.
And he took a high jump. I honestly think he jumped as high as this desk and pounding his fist and threw a paper at me, and then came back the next day to say, I'm sorry. I just lost it. I think people are living on the edge, and we're not in the middle of what's going on in LA. Can you imagine? Can you? I can't.
No, I can't.
I can't.
There's an irony with these statistics, though, because overall, violent crime has been decreasing, and the CDC releases, or sorry, not CDC, the FBI releases an annual report. They're slow to release those reports, so, and I think probably more so now because they have distractions with all these other investigations. But overall, violent crime is decreasing. It's actually going down. In fact, it's down about 5% this year, or estimated it's going to be down 5% from this time last year. So actually throughout COVID, violent crime is down about 5%, but homicides are up by 16.1%.
Right.
The New York Times had a really good article about this. I forget the exact title of the article, but homicides are skyrocketing, but the violent crimes are decreasing.
Probably.
And
Why do you think people just are not mobile right now?
I think a lot of the violent crime is premeditated. I think violent crime, certainly linked to drugs in a lot of cases. I think a lot of it is really sophisticated crime, the violent crime. I know a lot of people in law enforcement, and the coordination with gangs and things like that, those are premeditated. A lot of these are premeditated crimes.
Yeah,
the homicides, like what you're talking about, and I've heard this referred to over and over, is this powder keg environment where people are just exploding.
That's what scares me, to be honest with you. I wear a mask wherever I go in public, and I'm thinking, you look at somebody. I'm scared to even have eye contact, which is weird, because I don't know underneath that mask, are they smiling or are they angry?
Right.
And if I look the wrong way, is somebody going to lose it, totally lose it? And I'm the wrong person at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And that's happening as we see.
Yeah,
So,
people, getting into altercations over masks.
Right.
Or you name it,
I've witnessed a
where
few of
people are
those,
pulling guns out and shooting each other.
I haven't witnessed the gun part, but I've witnessed very angry outbursts about them not wearing a mask or wearing a mask, and
Yeah. I was the target. I talked about this in a previous podcast earlier this year. This was in the spring, but I was outside wearing a mask, and I got scolded for being too close to somebody.
Right.
And this guy came out and ripped me a new one, and he was like belligerent to me, and I was like, holy cow, like we are literally outside, and at the very closest 6 feet to this guy, I'm wearing a mask, and the guy comes out and just like scolds me. So yeah, people are, they're on edge.
Everybody's on edge. Just, this is all new. It's different. People are fed up. It's just, everybody's on edge.
Yeah, domestic violence is up. There was a 34% increase in the number of people seeking a divorce from March through June. That kind of has plateaued a little bit, but they're when they dig into this, from what I'm reading, a lot of these are people who were already in abusive marriages, and it's to the point where it's unbearable, and they need out.
That broke the camel's back. They can't handle the pressure anymore. It's interesting you're saying that. Talked to someone yesterday, and his wife left him, and he said early when COVID just began, she said, "Do you think we're going to make it through?" And he said, "I didn't give it a thought." But he said COVID did us in. He said she could, couldn't take it anymore.
So much
changed.
There's the pressure, there's the abuse, there's so many different reasons, but the numbers are increasing, and that's at the end of the day,
it's frightening.
Those numbers are going up.
Right.
Suicide, that's another category. The CDC says that suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States overall. So when you factor in all the causes, I know that's massive. And I think about this too. In my absolute worst state of mind, that was never, ever, ever, ever even a thought. Not even a fleeting thought.
But
excuse me. So I think about what state the mind has to be in to be at that low of a place where that you feel that's your only option.
Because we know what being low is all about, and I think we had the whole foundation of our lives knocked out from under us. But when you say suicide wasn't an option, so how low does a person have to go? I think it's being so totally alone. I always think about that when a person feels that alone, that they don't have one shred of hope from either.
That there's even one person who cares.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of reading on suicide to educate myself because of my work with grief, but it's right now we're feeling the most alone times that we've ever felt before. Children are feeling it. of all ages. Isolation is terrible. Churches are feeling it.
Yeah.
Communities are feeling it. Community gatherings are all but done.
Yeah.
Just it's rough right now.
Well, speaking of young people, suicide is the second leading cause of death from ages 10 to 34. So overall 10th in the nation of all causes of death, but it's the second leading cause from ages 10 to 34. If you think about that, I mean, that absolutely breaks my heart that it's our young people. It's our young people who are feeling the consequences of isolation, of abuse, of poverty, of all these different reasons that make them feel so hopeless. They're being ignored. Mental health is a real crisis in this nation.
And trying to get help for
right. Yeah.
health.
Yeah. That's those agencies
are overwhelmed.
They're starved for money, and they're overwhelmed with caseload.
Plus, when you're dealing with issues like that every day, you become somehow affected by it, and nobody's immune to the effects of COVID. No one, not one of us. So it's important as we talk about this, when we get to the other side of this, self-care, which we talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago in one of our podcasts, plus reaching out to others is going to be vitally important.
Yeah, and teaching people to process trauma.
Yes.
I mean, that's a whole nother topic in its own, but this is a major issue. Now, with what I'm worried about was with all these family deaths directly related to COVID, that's going to increase this sense of isolation, desperation, loneliness, grief, disparity, poverty. All of these things. There's this ripple effect that takes place. So these are not just deaths from COVID.
They're not just right.
This has massive,
ripple
very
effect,
long-lasting ripple effects. The CDC recorded over 48,000 suicides in 2018. They've not updated their website, and so 2018 was the last
I can't imagine
statistical
what it is
year.
right now, because 2018 is prior to COVID.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean there are predictions, but I've not seen any actual numbers, so I'm not going to speculate.
Right.
Okay, poverty. That's another category. PBS Frontline did a phenomenal, both an article and a 1-hour documentary, where they followed 3 different families with little kids that are living in extreme poverty. The title of this article, if you want to look it up, is "How COVID Has Impacted Poverty in America." It is excellent. The poverty rate in 2019 was at, this is just prior to COVID. In 2019, the poverty rate was 10.5%, the lowest since estimates first were published in 1959. So our economy, if you can look past the noise of political parties and affiliations and who's president and who's not president, because at the end of the day, who cares, right? If we just look at the economy and the rate of growth in the United States, our poverty rates were the lowest for decades, since 1959, when we first started recording this. And then COVID hit. And then that plunged all kinds of people into poverty. The poverty rates increased, not overly dramatically, but enough that millions of people were affected.
Well, I think, Jimmy, that's another reason why young people are so impacted by this. We lived in the land of milk and honey, whether it was by credit card or however. And suddenly, when mom and dad lose their jobs and you're depending on that little stimulus check and some biweekly unemployment that runs out eventually, you don't know what you do.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the 1959 time. I know what it's like to have a sack of potatoes, and your parents look at you and they say, "That's it for the week. We have nothing else." Literally nothing. Now, when we talked about having nothing, you could open the cupboards and see all kinds of food. It meant we don't have anything I like today.
Yeah, right.
But we're talking about poverty at a level where there is nothing, nada, no food. People have to figure out how they're going to get daily food. That affects children in a big way. The stress on parents is off the roof. I know my parents, I can remember my dad screaming for 2 solid days because my mother bought 3 bananas. And bananas at that time, I guess, were kind of like a
luxury item.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he flipped out. And I never forgot that. I was the kid that begged to taste a banana.
Yeah.
And man, we heard it. But, we grew up then. As time went on, things got better. And we didn't give a second thought. Now we're going back to worrying about where's the daily food going to come from.
It's really massive. And, locally, I was talking to a mutual friend of ours just on Saturday, and he serves on a school board at one of our schools, and he said, I'm looking at, we get the freshest statistics on poverty in Somerset County.
Do. Yeah, right.
And he said, it blows my mind. He said that the numbers would make anybody lose sleep.
Very sad.
It's staggering.
It's yes.
The number of children who are living without daily food.
Yep.
And that's
right in our community.
That's in our backyard.
Yes,
and that's
right
being
here.
replicated all over the place. And we do, so our school does the free meals.
Right.
They provide the free meals. You have to go.
God, yes.
You have to go and pick it up, and we do it. We go 5 days a week. We show up, we pick it up. We're very grateful. We're very thankful.
Absolutely.
We don't need the food, but it's available, and it's either going to go in a dumpster or it's going to be distributed.
Right.
So we appreciate it. But in talking to people who distribute the food, they said that, sadly, it's families like us. It's the teachers, and they're getting food for their kids, and we're being well taken care of, and we don't need the food. They said the families that need the food aren't showing up.
They can't get out, number
Correct.
one.
Yeah, they may not have transportation.
Right.
Or they're working, 8 to 5 jobs.
Right.
And they can't leave to go pick up the food.
Kids are sitting home alone.
Right.
Because if dad lucked out and got a job or kept his job, he's there, and mom is trying to find a job, or they have no second vehicle. How many do today? A lot of people don't anymore. It's times are changing.
Yeah.
And that shift backwards, it's never good when people have to do with less.
Yeah.
It's a hard adjustment. So
Yeah,
that's what
tough.
we're saying right now too.
The CARES Act that was passed back almost unanimously back in the spring, that lifted 18 million people out of poverty. But that certainly was temporary. When the CARES Act expired, poverty rates climbed to worse rates than what they were in April and May whenever they passed it. So, we're right back to square one. And, this is going to be a perpetual problem, I think, for quite a while.
It'll be years. Recovery will be years, yes.
Yeah.
Unless we learn how to do something about it, which hopefully we will plant some seeds.
Yeah. And then finally, this is certainly not, these are not the only categories and subcategories, but education. This is from voanews.com. I'm just going to read it directly because this is really important. It says, American school districts from coast to coast have reported the number of students failing classes has risen by as many as 2 or 3 times, with English language learners and disabled and disadvantaged students suffering the most.
Yeah. Heard locally about especially the disabled and children are not getting the help that they need.
Think of the TSSs, the aids that were assigned to individual students.
It's not happening.
You can't do it online.
No.
You cannot provide that level of care that's needed through a computer
we have
screen.
An
You can't do it
locally that a lot of children are just plain being left home alone.
Yeah.
And it takes parental help often to get on the Zoom call and all of that. And what young child is able to do that?
Yeah.
They can't.
It's impossible. It's a very bad problem.
It is.
This guy here, principal, he says it's completely off the rails from what is normal for us, and that was obviously alarming, said Eric Jesperson, principal of Oregon's McNary High School, where 38% of grades in late October were failing, compared with 8% in normal times. We just talked to somebody at our school district, and she said right now 48% of all kids, high school through elementary, 48% of kids are failing right now. They're failing out of school.
The education system is going to do about that, because when you really look at the picture and you take facts into consideration, it's highly unfair to the students.
Yeah.
To fail a student, I know a lady who her grandchildren were in advanced classes and they've lost all interest.
Yep.
The grandson is a D student now in math, whereas he was excelling and getting awards. But the emotional impact of this type of learning has taken a toll on so many also. So I think adjustments are going to have to be made. How that's made, I don't know. We have a massive amount of college students dropping out of classes because they hate the online.
Yeah.
They can't deal with it.
Yep.
Again, part of the college scene was living in community.
Right.
Couldn't wait to go live in a dorm and be on your own.
That was why I went to college. I certainly didn't go for the school.
I had to get that in there.
So I know that, this is super heavy stuff. And it's
is.
really, if you just step back and look at this, you look at how big this problem is and how vast and widespread and how deep and how traumatic it is. It's overwhelming. And so the question is, what can we do to help, and where do we begin? My opinion, I say we start with local. You've got to begin locally to unify with other people, because you're not going to be able to do it on your own.
No.
You're going to exhaust yourself. I'm exhausted with just helping my own kids through virtual school. Yeah. And that's, we have a cakewalk with that, right? I have a job that allows me to work from my office and home. And I'm exhausted. Every day I am exhausted and don't know how I can take one more thing on my plate. Right. And that's just doing regular work and helping my kids with school. That's it.
I think a good rule of thumb is always begin with one step at a time. Yeah. We can't be all things to all people. I know that's a phrase I live by. But if each person took on one step or one thing, just one.
Yeah.
One. If we are able, if we delivered one meal to one family once a week, we've blessed someone.
Yeah. And I think there's power too, and there's definitely power in numbers. And I think
when we
now more than ever, we need to really unify. And at a time when our nation is so divided, and families are splitting over political affiliation or religious affiliation or whatever affiliation, now's the time when we can't afford to be divided. We have to come together, regardless of gender, race, sexual preference, religious preference, political preference. It doesn't matter. Right? We need to be unified.
If you can't do anything else, be kind. Just be kind.
Yeah.
People need it. I was so excited yesterday to learn of the prayer gathering for a friend of ours, and I think that there's such power in that. So many people joined in on that. Those that couldn't physically be there joined in online, joined in from their hearts and homes. And you're right, community is really important.
We need it
together like
we need
that.
it. Need it.
Yes.
So I think churches especially need to retool. They need to refocus and shift outward rather than inward. They need to start thinking about other people other than the people who are in the confines of their building.
Right.
And we all need to focus on soul care. In addition to all the physical needs, we need to really focus on soul care. That's so huge. In fact, that may be number one priority. If people are well fed, but injustices are increasing, we're failing those people.
Right.
But the reverse of that is if we tackle the injustices, but people are starving, we're failing.
It's reaching that balance, and we all have different talents, which is awesome. Your talent may be praying over somebody or with them. If you can't do it in person, you're doing it by Zoom call or whatever, or telephone, whatever. My talent might be fixing a pot of soup and bringing it to someone. Someone else's talent may be sending 5 cards a week to someone to encourage them. But combined, when we put all that positive together, can we sweep through a community and really lift people up? And we never, I don't think you and I have seen a bigger need for that than now.
Yeah, I mean, in the business world, I've talked about this before, but it's called scaling your business. Well, I mean, volunteer work is the same. In the Bible, in I think it's Acts chapter 7, they had to start scaling. The people who are preaching were asked to help with food distribution, and the answer was no. They said no. Find capable people among you who are gifted with the ability to serve and distribute the food.
The beauty part is we're not all brains, we're not all eyes, we're not all ears. Each of us have that different talent. And when we, like you said, the scaling, whatever it's called, when we put it all together, we are a powerful unit.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And then, I think just as not really a side note, I guess. I don't want to diminish this to a side note because it's really important, but giving. For those who can give financially, I'm a very firm believer in churches investing to put their money to work. We think of the parable of the talents. The guy who took the one talent he was given and he buried that and hid it for a time so that he could return it back to the master was scolded and called wicked and lazy. We are given abilities and talents, and we need to put our money to work and invest it well. Small churches, which make up 80% of all churches in the United States, small churches are defined as 100 adherents or less. 100 weekly adherents or less. That makes up 80% of our churches. And the irony is that the majority of these churches that make up most of Christianity, they typically can't do much beyond paying their mortgage and their pastor because they are small churches.
Right.
So this, in my opinion, is a huge waste of people's money. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of resources. And so finding churches that invest its money well, and they use it well to help people in need. They don't use it on themselves. They use it. They use the bulk of that money to help people in need. Find those churches. They're out there. We are one such church. On any given Sunday now, because of COVID, we have 30 people in our pews. I mean, if we're lucky, if we're doing well, we have 30 people in attendance. I think
that's a norm for a lot of the smaller churches.
For many churches. And I'm okay with that. And that's, we're certainly not about packing people in there. We encourage people to stay home and watch online. We have the technology. But my point is, even when everybody's there, we're a very small church. But we invest our money very well. And that money is growing. It's growing exponentially at this point. And we're going to continue to invest it well. And we're using it.
We're not
sitting on it. It's not getting moldy. We're using it.
You are.
We'd never be able to do that had we not invested.
Right.
I mean, we wouldn't be paying our bills right now, to be honest.
And that's an encouragement for people to continue to give to churches like that. Knowing that the oversight is there. I want us to end on something, Jimmy, which you and I didn't talk about. Just a quick note to those who don't have a home church. To those, there are a lot of. We're speaking to abuse survivors who are not comfortable in church, and they've been ousted from church. How do they get connected, plugged in, real quickly? And I know we're about out of time.
I mean, online is it's a vast area that right now, I mean, the number of online churches has grown exponentially out of necessity. Mm-hmm. But that can become really overwhelming to find safe churches. So, and to be honest, I've not had the time to really sift
Research,
through it and look. I know that our congregation certainly is one that people say it all the time. We have many abuse survivors who join us online.
Right. And you've mentioned time again, Porch Swing Ministries.
Yeah, Porch Swing Ministries
so we'll
is
put word out there for abuse survivors who are feeling lonely and not plugged in. I think we need to plug in, is what I'm saying.
But I would just urge people to do your research and find out. If you don't know, we don't post our budget online, which, mostly because we're so small that I would be the one doing it. We don't have people don't have the know-how to do stuff on the website. I don't have the time.
Right.
But if somebody calls or sends an email and says, "Hey, how are you guys using your money?" We'll be completely transparent. We'll let people know, and we do a ton of stuff for people in the community who are really struggling, who would never otherwise get help.
That's important for all of us to know.
Yeah. So find churches that are doing that, and churches that don't cover up abuse, and they're a safe place for abuse survivors. Find those churches. They're out there. They may be hard to find, but I would really encourage people to contribute financially to churches that are investing their money well, and they're using it not on their pastor, not on I get paid. To be honest, I get paid not well.
Yeah, I know.
But the money's there. I could ask for more money, but I don't. That's a waste. That's a waste of those resources.
And
I'm doing fine
God
financially.
has blessed you in your ministry because of it. Because of, I don't think we can ever outgive.
No.
We can never.
But find churches. Find churches that are using that money.
Yes.
To help people who genuinely need it.
You just stated all kinds of needs here for all of us. And I would encourage, as we bring this to a close, for each of us to do some introspection and think of what our talents are.
Yeah.
I know where I'm focusing this year, and I did it last year, and it was such a blessing, focused on 2 different people, and I did things to encourage those 2 people, either by finances or by food or by phone calls or by text or whatever. But you know what? I reaped the bigger rewards. Yeah. I did. I reaped the bigger rewards from doing that. And I would encourage, everyone to think of what talent you have. It may be one talent, but it's one. And your one talent can reach out and touch others. And when we do that, honestly, it relieves our burdens of the heart.
For sure.
Yeah. It does.
So, we can do this, and we can tackle this, but we need to do it together. So we'll leave you with this truth bomb for the day. The best way to help right now is to pray, to volunteer your time, and to know where your money's going. Give of your time and your money freely, and God will use that, and He will bless people. But don't foolishly just give your money and say, "Oh, well, it's in God's hands now." Know where your money's going. Know how it's being used. Absolutely, there is no crime in that. So we encourage you to help people. We can do this. We can help, and we're encouraged by all of you. And thank you for tuning into this episode. And we'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron. And check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.